Hello everyone, welcome back to Read Along Saturday, and today we are continuing with our book The Prince by Niccolò Machiavelli. Chapter number 12, How many kinds of soldiery there are and concerning mercenaries. Having discoursed particularly on the characteristic of such principalities as in the beginning I propose to discuss, and having considered in some degree the causes of their being good or bad, and having shown the methods by which many have sought to acquire them and to hold them, it now remains for me to discuss generally the means of offense and defense which belong to each of them. We have seen above how necessary it is for a prince to have his foundations well laid, otherwise it follows of necessity he will go to ruin. The chief foundation of all states, new as well as old or composite, are good laws and good arms. And as there cannot be good laws where the state is not well armed, it follows that where they are well armed, they have good laws. I shall leave the laws out of discussion and shall speak of arms. I say, therefore, that the arms with which a prince defends his state are either his own, or they are mercenaries, auxiliaries, or mixed. Mercenaries and auxiliaries are useless and dangerous, and if one holds his state based on these arms, he will stand neither firm nor safe. For they are disunited, ambitious, and without discipline, unfaithful, valiant before friends, cowardly before enemies. They have neither the fear of God nor fidelity to men, and destruction is deferred only so long as the attack is, for in peace one is robbed by them, and in war by the enemy. The fact is that they have no other attraction or reason for keeping the field than a trifle of stipend, which is not sufficient to make them willing to die for you. They are ready enough to be your soldier, whilst you do not make war. But if war comes, they take themselves off or run from the foe, which I should have little trouble to prove, for the ruin of Italy have been caused by nothing else than by resting all her hopes for many years on mercenaries, and although they formerly made some display and appeared valiant against themselves, yet when the foreigners came they showed what they were. Thus it was the Charles, King of France, was allowed to seize Italy with chalk in hand, and he who told us that our sins were the cause of it told the truth, but they were not the sins he imagined, but those which I have related. And as they were the sins of the princes, it is the prince who has suffered the penalty. I wish to demonstrate further the infelicity of these arms. The mercenary captains are either capable men or they are not. If they are, you cannot trust them, because they always aspire to their own greatness, either by oppressing you or who are their master, or other contrary to your intentions. But if the captain is not skillful, you are ruined in the usual way. And if it is urged that whoever is armed will act in the same way, whether the mercenary or not, I reply that when arms have to be resorted to either by a prince or a republic, then the prince ought to go in person and perform the duty of a captain. The republic has to send its citizens, and when one is sent who does not turn out satisfactorily, it ought to recall him, and when one is worthy, to hold him by the laws so that he does not leave the command. And the experience has shown princes and republics single-handed making the greatest progress, and the mercenaries doing nothing except damage, and it is more difficult to bring a republic armed with its own arms under the sway of one of its citizens than to bring in one armed with foreign arms. Rome and Sparta stood for many ages armed and free. The Switzers are completely armed and quite free. Of ancient mercenaries, for example, there are the Carthaginians, who were oppressed by the mercenary soldiers after the first war with the Romans, although the Carthaginians had their own citizens for captains. After the death of Epaminondas, Philip of Macedon was made captain of their soldiers by the Thebans, and after victory he took away their liberty. Duke Filippo being dead, the Milanese enlisted Francesco Sforza against the Venetians, and he, having overcome the enemy at Caravaggio, allied himself with him to crush the Milanese, his masters. His father Sforza, having been engaged by Queen Joanna of Naples, left her unprotected, so that she was forced to throw herself into the arms of the King of Aragon in order to save her kingdom. And if the Venetians and the Florentines formally extended their dominions by these arms, and yet their captains did not make themselves princes, but have defended them, I reply that the Florentines in this case have been favored by chance, and for the able captains of whom they might have stood in fear. Some have not conquered, some have been opposed, and others have turned their ambitions elsewhere. One who did not conquer was Giovanni Accoto, and since he did not conquer, his fidelity cannot be proved. But everyone will acknowledge that had he conquered, the Florentines would have stood at his discretion. Sforza had the Barascius always against him, so they watched each other. Francesco turned his ambition to Lombardy. Baraccio against the church and the kingdom of Naples. But let us come to that which happened a short while ago. The Florentines appointed as their captain Pagolo Vitelli, a most prudent man who from a private position had risen to the greatest renown. If this man had taken Pisa, nobody can deny that it would have been proper for the Florentines to keep in with him. For if he became the soldier of their enemies, they had no means of resisting, and if they had held to him, they must obey him. The Venetians, if their achievements are considered, will be seen to have acted safely and gloriously so long as they sent to war their own men, when with armed gentlemen and plebeians they did valiantly. This was before they turned to enterprises on land, but when they began to fight on land, they forsook this virtue and followed the custom of Italy. And in the beginning of their expansion on land, through not having much territory and because of their great reputation, they had not much to fear from the captains. But when they expanded, as under Carmignolo, they had a taste of this mistake. For having found him a most valiant man, they beat the Duke of Milan under his leadership. And on the other hand, knowing how lukewarm he was in the war, they feared they would no longer conquer him. And for this reason, they were not willing, nor were they able, to let him go. And so, not to lose again that which they have acquired, they were compelled, in order to secure themselves, to murder him. They had afterwards for their captains Bartolomeo de Bergamo, Roberto da San Severino, the Count of Pitigliano, and the like, under whom they had to dread loss and not gain, as happened afterwards at Valia, where in one battle they lost that which is 800 years they had acquired with so much trouble, because from such arms conquests come but slowly, long delayed and inconsiderable, but the losses sudden and portentous. And as of with these examples, I have reached Italy, which has been ruled for many years by mercenaries. I wish to discuss them more seriously in order that, having seen their rise and progress, one may be better prepared to counteract them. You must understand that the empire has recently come to a repudiated in Italy, and the Pope had acquired more temporal power, and Italy had been divided up into more states. For the reason that many of the great cities took up arms against their nobles, who formerly favored the emperor, were oppressing them, whilst the church was favoring them as to gain authority in temporal power. In many others, their citizens became princes. For this came to pass that Italy fell partly into hands of the church and of republics, and the church consisting of priests and the republic of citizens unaccustomed to arms. Both commenced to enlist foreigners. The first who gave renown to this soldiery was Albrigio da Conio, the Romanian. From the school of this man sprang among the others Braccio and Froza, who in their time were the arbiters of Italy. After these came all the other captains who still now have directed the arms of Italy, and the end of their valor has been that she has been overrun by Charles, robbed by Louis, ravaged by Ferdinand, and insulted by the Switzer. The principle that has guided them has been first to lower the credit of infantry so that they might increase their own. They did this because, subsisting on their pay and without territory, they were unable to support many soldiers. And a few infantry did not give them any authority. So they were led to employ cavalry, with a moderate force of which they were maintained and honored. And affairs were brought to such a pass that, in an army of 20,000 soldiers, there were not to be found 2,000 foot soldiers. They had, besides this, used every art to lessen fatigue and danger to themselves and their soldiers, not killing in the fray, but taking prisoners and liberating without ransom. They did not attack towns at night, nor did the garrisons of the towns attack encampments at night. They did not surround the camp either with stockade or ditch, nor did they campaign in the winter. All these things were permitted by their military rules and devised by them to avoid, as I said, both fatigue and dangers. Thus, they have brought Italy to slavery and contempt. So, now in chapter 12, what we read, the core topic was that the different types of armies a prince can use and why relying on mercenaries is disastrous. Now, two foundation of the state: good laws and good arms. Good laws depend on good arms. Kind of arms: own troops, that is national troops, composed of subjects, citizens, or prince's own men. Highly recommended, right? Second one is mercenary troops, hired soldiers, severely condemned. Auxiliary troops, troops lent by a powerful ally, also condemned. Fourth one is the mixed troops, where a combination of one's own and auxiliary or mercenary troops. Now, the dangers of mercenary is that they are unreliable, they are cowardly in battle, threat in peace, and they have no loyalty. Now, unreliable because they are disunited, ambitious, undisciplined, and faithless. They are without the fear of God. So they are only loyal to whoever pays them, right? Cowardly because they will desert if there is a pure, real danger. Because you are not going to pay them enough, so they risk their life for you. Threat in peace. In peacetime, they would plunder the prince. In wartime, they will fail him. In peace, they would plunder the prince. How? Because now they are going to, ask ransoms to not create chaos in peacetime, right? So, again, unreliable. They have no loyalty, as I said before. They will not die for a prince or a state. They will not die for you, right? Now, there are some historical examples where Machiavelli cites here. The first one is the role of Italy, due to its reliance on mercenary forces leading to conquest by foreign powers. He also points that Charles VIII of France taking Italy with chalk, meaning effortlessly marking his building without resistance, right? So the main point is a prince should never rely on a mercenary army to have a stable and secure state. He must establish and command his own national troops who are loyal and willing to fight for the prince and the country. And it's an important lesson. Chapter 13 concerning auxiliaries, mixed soldiery and one's own. Auxiliaries, which are the other useless arm, are employed when the prince is called in with his forces to aid and defend, as was done by Pope Julius in the most recent times. For he, having in the enterprise against Ferrara had poor proof of his mercenaries, turned to auxiliaries and stipulated with Ferdinand, King of Spain, for his assistance with men and arms. These arms may be useful and good in themselves, but for him who calls them in, they are always disadvantageous. For losing, one is undone, and winning, one is their captive. And although ancient histories may be full of examples, I do not wish to leave this recent one of Pope Julius II, the peril of which cannot fail to be perceived, for he, wishing to get Ferrara, threw himself entirely into the hands of the foreigner. But his good fortune brought about a third event, so that he did not reap the fruit of his rash choice, because having his auxiliaries routed in Ravenna, the Switzers, having risen and driven out the conquerors against all expectation, both his and others, it so came to pass that he did not become a prisoner of his enemies, they having fled, or not to his auxiliaries, he having conquered by other arms than theirs. The Florentines, being entirely without arms, sent 10,000 Frenchmen to take Pisa, whereby they ran more danger than at any other time of their troubles. The Emperor of Constantinople, to oppose his neighbors, sent 10,000 Turks into Greece, who, on the war being finished, were not willing to quit. This was the beginning of the servitude of Greece to the infidels. Therefore, let him who has no desire to conquer make use of these arms, for they are much more hazardous than mercenaries, because with them the ruin is ready made. They are all united, all yield obedience to others, but with mercenaries, when they have conquered, more time and better opportunities are needed to injure them. They are not at all of one community. They are found and paid by you, and a third party which you made their head is not able to at all once to assume authority to injure them. In conclusion, in mercenaries, dastardy is most dangerous, in auxiliaries, valor. The wise prince therefore has always avoided these arms and turned to his own, and has been willing rather to lose with them than to conquer with the others, not deeming that a real victory which is gained with the arms of the others. I shall never hesitate to cite Caesar Borgia and his actions. This duke entered the Romagna with auxiliaries, taking their only French soldiers, and with them he captured Imola and Forli. But afterwards, such forces not appearing to be him reliable, he turned to mercenaries, discerning less danger in them, and enlisted the Orsini and Vitelli, whom presently, on handling and finding them doubtful, unfaithful, and dangerous, he destroyed and turned to his own men. And the difference between one and the other of these forces can easily be seen. One considers the difference there was in reputation of the duke, when he had the French, when he had the Orsini and Vitelli, and when he relied on his own soldiers, on whose fidelity he could always count and found it ever increasing. He was never esteemed more highly than when everyone saw that he was complete master of his own forces. I was not intending to go beyond Italian and recent examples, but I am unwilling to leave out Hiero the Syracusan, he being one of those I have named above. This man, as I have said, made head of the army by the Syracusans, soon found out that the mercenary soldiery, constituted like our Italian condottieri, was of no use. It is appearing to him that he could neither keep them nor let them go. He had them all cut to pieces, and afterwards made war with his own forces and not with aliens. I wish also to recall to memory an instance from the Old Testament applicable to this subject. David offered himself to Saul to fight with Goliath, the Philistine champion, and to give him courage. Saul armed him with his own weapons, which David rejected as soon as he had them back, saying he could make no use of them, and that he wished to meet the enemy with his sling and his knife. In conclusion, the arms of the others either fall from your back, or they weigh you down, or they bind you fast. Charles VII, the father king of Louis XI, having by good fortune and valor liberated France from the English, recognized the necessity of being armed with forces of his own, and he established in his kingdom ordinances concerning men at arms and infantry. Afterwards, his son, King Louis, abolished the infantry and began enlist the Switzer, which mistake, followed by others, is, as is now seen, a source of peril to that kingdom, because having raised the reputation of the Switzer, he has entirely diminished the value of his own arms, for he has destroyed the infantry altogether. And his men at arms he had subordinated to others, for being as they are so accustomed to fight along the Switzer, it does not appear that they can now conquer without them. Hence it arises that the French cannot stand against the Switzer, and without the Switzer, they do not come off well against others. The armies of the French have thus become mixed, partly mercenary, partly national, both of which arms together are much better than mercenaries alone or auxiliaries alone, but much inferior to one's own forces. And this example proves it, for the kingdom of France would be unconquerable if the ordinance of Charles had been enlarged or maintained. But the scanty wisdom of man, on entering into affair which looks well at first, cannot discern the poison that is hidden in it. As I have said above the hectic fevers, therefore, if he who rules on principality cannot recognize evils until they are upon him, he is not truly wise, and this insight is given to few. And if the first disaster of the Roman Empire should be examined, it will be found to have commenced only with the enlisting of the Goths, because from the time the vigor of Roman Empire began to decline, and all that valor which has raised it passed away to others. I conclude, therefore, that no principality is secure without having its own forces. On the contrary, it is entirely dependent on good fortune. Not having the valor which is adversity would defend it. And if it has always been the opinion of the judgment of wise men that nothing can be so uncertain or unstable as fame or power not funded on its own strength. And one's own forces are those which are composed either of subjects, citizens, or dependents. All others are mercenaries or auxiliaries. And the way to make ready one's own forces will be easily found if the rules suggested by me shall be reflected upon. And if one will consider how Philip, the father of Alexander the Great, and many republics and the princes have armed and organized themselves, to which rules I entirely commit myself. So now chapter 13 the core topic was a deeper condemnation of auxiliary troops and further emphasis on absolute necessity of princes' own national troops. The auxiliary troops, defined as troops lent by a powerful ally for your defense, condemned even more strongly than mercenaries. While mercenaries are unreliable and dangerous, auxiliaries are even worse because they come unified force loyal to another ruler. The danger of having auxiliaries in a war is that if they lose, well, you are ruined, of course. But if they win, you are their captive, dependent on a foreign power that sent them. So you are undone either way. Example given by Machiavelli is Pope Julius II using Spanish auxiliaries led to the near ruin. The Florentines using French auxiliaries put them in great danger. Now, mixed troops. A combination of princes' own troops and mercenaries and auxiliaries, better than purely mercenaries or auxiliaries, but inferior to the entirety of national troops. Example, the Roman Empire declined when it started using Goths as auxiliaries. Now, importance of having a national troops, right? A prince is truly secure and powerful only when he commands his own army, composing of his subjects, his citizens, or his men. Without his own arms, a principality is inherently weak, unreliable, and dependent on fortune. Okay, so according to Machiavelli, the mark of a wise prince is that he will always prefer to lose with his own troops rather to win with some others, knowing that the victory achieved through foreign arms is not a true victory but a surrender of independence. So the main point is, prince's very existence depends on his national troops, and reliance on any other type of force is incredibly dangerous and a sign of fundamental weakness. So that was it for today. I will see you next Saturday. Until then, keep watching and keep reading.